Oh, isn't that a cute baby? Oh, let me just have a look. He's just put loads of pins in me. He must be some sort of voodoo child. That's one of the songs we're talking about on this week's The 2000s Chart Show.
The 2000s Chart Show. The 2000s Chart Show.
I'm enjoying these intros. They're getting ever more deranged, especially as the office where I record these episodes gets hotter and hotter, and I get madder and madder. Anyway, welcome to the 2000s Chart Show. I'm Samuel Spencer. This is the show celebrating 2000s pop music. Every week we are reliving the 40 biggest selling songs, the 40 biggest Wow, I've done 150 episodes of this and got it right first time every time except that one. Let's go again. Reliving the 40 biggest selling songs from this week 20 years ago and telling the stories of all the new entries. That means that this week we are the podcast that will one day have to answer to the Children of the Sky. That from Bob Sinclar, one of the big dance hits of 2006.
You will have to answer to the Children of the Sky.
He is trying to knock Shakira off the top spot, as is Scotland's own Paolo Nutini.
Grant my last request.
Australia's own The Rogue Traders. And Morecambe's own Busta Rhymes, as we learned in our previous episode. Busta Rhymes was one of the first people ever to do karate in the northern town of Morecambe when he stayed there as a child. That's the sort of fun 2000s facts you can expect from this show as we count down that top 40. So let's start doing that, shall we?
The top 40.
That means, of course, starting with
Bargain Bin.
the songs that flopped and the songs that are on their way to the top, the tracks between 30 and 40, between the 9th and 15th of July, when there were 12 new entries, the first of which is at number 38, so let's get to it. Kicking off with Kick Push by Lupe Fiasco.
40.
There's no skating here, so we kick push.
3 weeks for that one.
39.
And Primal Scream celebrating their second month on the chart with Country Girl.
Country girl, take my hand.
But we have no time for Country Girl. We must talk about Fall Out Boy. This is their track. A little less 16 candles, a little more touch me. Or as I like to call it, a little less pretentious title, a little more maybe write a good song.
38.
You're just the girl all the boys wanna dance with.
Had originally been called a little less Molly Ringwald, a little more Samantha Fox, about wanting a girl that they fancy to be a little bit less oblivious of their existence and a bit more like the sort of sexually frisky Samantha Fox, who released a strip poker game I learnt this week in the 80s, which features very awkward sort of pixel art of Samantha Fox getting ever more naked as you got increasing royal flushes. Anyway, they changed the name to avoid legal action from Samantha Fox. I don't think it gets rid of the definite undercurrent of misogyny which exists in that Fall Out Boy title, and I would say numerous others of their titles, such as I slept with someone in Fall Out Boy and all I got was this stupid song written about me, and their then unreleased track, I Liked You a Whole Lot Better Before You Became a Fucking MySpace Whore, which is nice. I see this as a band bristling at having a mostly young female fan base who, to be fair, lap this stuff up. I definitely saw I Liked You a Whole Lot Better Before You Became a Fucking MySpace Whore as many people's MSN Messenger name. And if you weren't putting oblique song lyrics into your MSN Messenger name, were you even alive in the 2000s? Pete Wentz had actually admitted that this track was one of the weakest songs lyrically that he had written for this album. Asked by Chorus FM why it was then released as a single, he was actually very honest and said, when you're on a major label, there are compromises to be made. It's a compromise within the band where a lot of people said, we want to do this, and I was like, well, if we compensate, we make a cooler video with a cooler storyline and I'll back it. I really like the melody, but I don't think I lived up to it lyrically, and I'm just trying to make up for it, I guess. And it does have a very memorable video which features Pete Wentz and a number of the signings on his record label, Decay Dance, members of the Academy Is, Panic at the Disco, and Gym Class Heroes, all appearing as vampires in it, because we are at that crucial point in 2000 when we're all going to be obsessed with vampires for the next decade for some reason. Twilight had come out in October 2005, and of course sharing the chart with Fall Out Boy is Supermassive Black Hole by Muse, which soundtracks the famous, and I would say famously awful, baseball scene in the Twilight movie. But yes, this video featuring basically members of every major emo band who aren't My Chemical Romance, making this essentially the Avengers Endgame of my most hated genre of the decade. It's like they're personally trying to taunt me, suck my own blood dry, and I hate it. So I'm glad they're gone for a while. They will not be back until February 2007 with what will be their biggest and, in my opinion, best hit, This Ain't a Scene, It's an Arms Race. But we have an arms race for the number 1 spot, which Fall Out Boy have truly fallen at the first hurdle of, let's see, some people who did a little bit better.
37.
Red Hot Chili Peppers with Danny California, 11 weeks for that one. Our next new entry, which is at
36.
Oh joy, one of my least favourite things to talk about on this show. Dance duos. They are never interesting. Let's see if Till West and DJ Delicious buck that trend with their number 36 new entry, Same Man. Spoiler alert, no they won't. Till West is Till Andemar, house producer and DJ from Cologne. He is joined by Aunt Maya Wegner, DJ Delicious, the son of a band musician in the suburbs outside of Frankfurt. DJ Delicious, interesting as he would go on to remix the Scissor Sisters, which makes a lot of sense because their immortal gay anthem, Let's Have a Kiki, definitely owes something to this track. Or maybe more specifically, the track that this song is sampling, the 1983 B-Beat Girls track, For the Same Man, which makes this another dance cover of an 80s track of the sort that are swamping dance music charts in the mid-2000s, and Till West and DJ Delicious didn't even have the originality to pick a song that hadn't been sampled in dance music before. This song had been featured in a top 40 hit as far back as 1995, where the dance DJ Size 9 released the song I'm Ready, which sampled this and got to number 30. Before that, it had been sampled in the track I Want to Have Some Fun by, weirdly, Samantha Fox, who I was definitely not expecting to come up twice in 2 entries on this 2000s chart, seeing as her last hit was like 1989. Here's the deal for you. If Samantha Fox comes up in every entry on this podcast, that is, I would say, definitive proof that we live in a simulation and not even a good one. But anyway, that's it in terms of anything vaguely interesting about DJ Delicious and Till West. Doing all of these dance duos, and we have to deal with a lot of them on this show, it really makes me want to get into a time machine, go back to the mid-2000s with a friend who can DJ, and release songs, and then just do the maddest shit, so that anyone in the future who is insane enough to do something like a podcast that goes through every top 40 in the 2000s, I know who would be mad enough to do that, at least then they'll have a dance duo they can say something interesting about. Say what you want about Fatboy Slim, he definitely fell off in the 2000s musically, but at least he allowed himself to become a full alcoholic, so we'd have something interesting to talk about. So thanks Norman Cook for that, and no thank you, Till West and DJ Delicious. Let's keep heading up this bargain bin.
35.
Control Myself by LL Cool J and Jennifer Lopez. Very glad that song hopefully leaving the chart now after its 10th week.
She turned around and giggled. She said,
34.
All Americans Reject Dirty Little Secret.
I'll keep you my dirty little secret.
There is something that I realised doing this show, is that things that you hated 20 years ago, now you start to like because they have a sort of warm glow of nostalgia to them. And that is true of All American Rejects' Dirty Little Secret, which I would have thought of the worst sort of Kerrang muck in 2006, and now find myself singing along to in the shower quite frequently.
33.
Is It Any Wonder by Keane? That's a song I love then and love now. 7 weeks on the chart, that's been here. Taking us to our third new entry in the bargain bin, the last one in this bottom section, comes from another of those mid-tier indie bands, which, great for us, are probably the second thing we... No, I was going to say they're the second thing we least like to talk about, but it goes Sex Offenders, who we have to talk about a lot, Hello Lost Prophets, then dance duos, and then never quite made it indie bands. So we're absolutely feeding this week. Here are the Rifles at
32.
with She's Got Standards. And I would say, hearing this track, they aren't musical. This the third and final top 40 for the Rifles, who previously gave us Local Boy in November 2005 and repeated Offender in March 2006. A band only able to get out of the bargain bin exactly one time. Probably not the best advert for our Patreon, but if you want to hear clips of all the songs we talk about on this show, as well as our bonus series ranking the number ones of each year of the 2000s, that is available over at our Patreon. I'm a repeated offender for plugging, and it seems that the Rifles not so much of repeat offenders when it comes to appearing on the chart. They were described at the time as if the Kooks were mashed up with the Jam. They are Joel Stoker, Lucas Crowther, Rob Pine, Grant Marsh. They're from London, got together in 2003. They were most known for being championed by Zane Lowe, who at one point was very much the indie kingmaker on the UK charts. He often had them on his show, and in fact the B-side to this track is a cover of the Cure single In Between Days, which they did on his show. I would say, though, by this point his place as an indie kingmaker is slipping slightly. He tried to launch his own band, Breaks Co-op, and their first song was called The Other Side, and it was only able to get to the other side of the top 40, aka Not On It. This song from the Rifles, produced by Ian Broody, as a producer last seen on these charts for his work with The Coral, but actually he was appearing on these charts as a singer himself just a few weeks ago. He is, of course, a member of the Lightning Seeds, whose Three Lions got a chart boost thanks to the 2006 World Cup. And in fact, he actually got a higher chart position with his song from 10 years ago than the Rifles have. He actually got that all the way to the top 10. In 2006, though, Paul Weller from The Jam joined the Rifles on stage, and I would say they are the sort of band that only really exists to get Paul Weller to come on stage with them. They should have just packed it in after that, really. They'd clearly peaked. No point in making any more music after that. But they persisted. They would eventually release a second album in 2009. The lack of success for that caused two members of the band to leave. But mind you, if I'd had to do what they did in 2009, I would have quit too. They did one of the most evil things I've ever seen, which is take Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire, his legendary song where he recounts the events of the 20th century, and did a rewritten football-themed version at a football awards ceremony. More proof of a theory that I've been sharing on this show for a while, that indie music only really becomes landfill indie when the football fans get involved. Their version of We Didn't Start the Fire is so bad that it even makes the Fall Out Boy version, when they're talking about the 21st century, seem almost good by comparison. Although then I read the lyrics: Harry Potter, Twilight, Michael Jackson dies, nuclear accident, Fukushima, Japan, Crimean Peninsula, Cambridge Analytica, Kim Jong-un, Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man. And I remember that the Fall Out Boy version of We Didn't Start the Fire is maybe the worst song ever written, and that's really hard for me to say when I so firmly believe, as long-time listeners know, that This Time Dirty Bit by the Black Eyed Peas is the worst song. By 2013, though, all four original members had reunited to work on a fourth album, which peaked at number 21, which was the highest position a Rifles album had ever reached on the UK Top 40, and so that is a great place to leave them, as well as leaving them here at number 32. This is the last I will ever be talking about them. Another C-tier indie band biting the dust. Biting so much dust, they're leaving teeth marks in the dust. I don't know what that means, but I said it, and I couldn't possibly edit it and remove it. Although if I have, of course you won't have heard any of this, and you'll be none the wiser.
31.
Kelly Clarkson and Breakaway, that definitely not a chart Breakaway hit. Peaked to number 22, now is here at the bargain bin in its third week. Beatfreakz with Somebody's Watching Me are at number
30,
which could mean that finally, after over half a year on these charts, next week might be the first top 40 that doesn't feature the vocals of Michael Jackson, or at least a cheaply imitated version of the vocals of Michael Jackson, as I suspect is what features on the Beatfreakz song. But they're at 30, which means we're closing the bargain bin there.
29.
Although at 29 is a song that I would definitely put in the bin if I had a choice. This is our stinker of the week.
Stinker of the week.
With his first single, he made it all the way to the top 10 thanks to thousands of bouncy balls, which he, of course, soundtracked in a Sony Bravia advert. That was a cover of The Knife, that song Heartbeats. The artist is José Gonzalez. Here, he's doing an even more rogue cover. This is his version of Kylie Minogue's Hand on Your Heart.
Put your hand on your heart and tell me.
Another great song made unspeakably boring by José Gonzalez. This really had to be Stinker of the Week because it helps to create this genre of the sensitive acoustic cover, which becomes a scourge on the world, frankly, as YouTube becomes a force in media, and of course ends up with Callum Scott releasing Dancing on My Own, a terrible version of that track that strips away everything good about the original song and yet went all the way to number 2, when the original could only go to number 8. But why talk about another shitty acoustic cover when we could talk about Hand on Your Heart, which was originally released as Kylie Minogue's 6th single in May 1989. It became her 3rd number 1 following I Should Be So Lucky and Especially For You. It was one of the first big sellers on cassette, apparently, the original Hand on Your Heart. It sold enough copies on cassette, in fact, that it, had they been chart eligible, It would have taken her all the way to number 1 a whole week earlier, but her record company had released the cassette at a cut price, which was cheaper than chart regulations allowed cassettes to be sold, which meant that the Bangles with Eternal Flame were at number 1, and it also meant that the cassette rules were changed soon afterwards to allow cheaper cassettes, which was great. I'm so glad that Kylie made that happen, because as somebody with limited pocket money, you could get 2 cassettes really for the price of 1 CD single. So cheap cassettes are definitely something I made the most of as a kid. So thanks, Kylie. That was an Australian accent there, in case you couldn't tell. My husband, I was playing this song, I was doing the research for this episode. He told me that he used to put it on mixtapes for people. This is the José Gonzalez version, when he was trying to sort of woo them. And he is incredibly fortunate that he didn't try that on me, because I think that would have been an instant breakup red flag for me. The Kylie version was Stock Aitken and Waterman's attempt to incorporate more house sounds into their pop music. And I think without those house influences, this song doesn't really work, as we're finding out here. And José Gonzalez, as a result, will never have another top 40 hit. So we sadly won't get to hear him ruin one of his own songs for a nice change. Although maybe his own material is more interesting. His second album apparently was inspired by evolutionary biology and ethics, including the books of Richard Dawkins, which is a bit of a step away from the Kylie Minogue songbook. José Gonzalez, in case you've forgotten the last time we talked about him, born in Sweden to Argentinian parents who had fled a right-wing military junta in their home country due to his father being politically involved. The Swedish embassy offered them safe haven, and so it was that country where they decided to make a home. He grew up listening both to Western pop music and Brazilian music. His father had also been a guitarist who encouraged his son to follow in his footsteps. Of course, known for his gentle style of guitar playing, which he credits from playing his guitar late at night and playing so softly that his parents wouldn't be woken up. He was in a number of hardcore bands in the 90s, then in an indie rock band called Junip, before moving towards this more acoustic style after taking flamenco lessons to give his guitar work a distinct Latin feel. Apparently, he became known for his weird covers. He also did Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen, Love Will Tear Us Apart, Joy Division, and Massive Attack's Teardrop. All songs which I would say are about the sonic ambience of the track, which of course would be ruined by his versions. By this point, he may have had a lower charting song in the UK because he was focusing on the US. He had blown up there after one of his songs appeared in a season finale of The OC. And so I've slagged off his music a lot here, and I don't regret that. But I have no issues with the guy himself. He's a vegan atheist who has long been part of what is called Giving What We Can, a movement in which people pledge to give at least 10% of their income to charity, which I would do for this show if we had any income. All of that is great, of course, for José Gonzalez, but I would say still keep your hands off Kylie, mate, yeah? Speaking of his version of this song to NPR, he said, "I was watching TV and saw the video and started listening to the lyrics. It felt like the production of the whole song and the video didn't match the words." And that kind of sums up my problem, actually, with these sensitive acoustic covers, is the subtext of them is always like, these songs are so good. If only we could strip away all of the shitty pop production and get to the pure heart of the song. And I'm like, the shiny, glossy pop production is actually what's good about this song. It's not a hindrance. And so I'm happy that he hasn't had a bigger hit with this and is at number 29.
28.
A song that's emerging as an unlikely contender for the 20-week club. It's now reached its 4th month on the chart. It's the Kooks with Naive, dropping 3 places there in their 16th week on the chart. And they are followed up by another long-time resident in the UK Top 40 in the form of SOS by Rihanna.
27.
Because of how counting numbers works, that leads us to
26.
Another new entry, a prime candidate for should have been a number 1. In fact, I'm just checking why I actually did make that to see if it's the right one. Yes, okay, yeah, I guess that is a slightly better song, but love this one. The second single and final UK Top 40 here for the Pipettes. This is Pull Shapes. We talked about them before when their track Your Kisses Are Wasted on Me was released earlier this year. They were a sort of art rock attempt at doing a modern day version of those 60s girl bands like the Supremes and the Ronettes. Originally, they were Rebecca Stevens, Julia Clark-Lowes and Rose Eleanor Dougal, or as their stage names went, Riot Becky, the Duchess of Darkness and Rosé. Julia Clark-Lowes left the band in early 2005, replaced by Gwenno Saunders. at which point the record label Memphis Industries, who had had some success with the Go team, offered the Pipettes a recording contract. Although I would say not that much success with the Go team, if you remember when we talked about them, whenever that was. They had to spend loads of money to re-record their entire debut album because they didn't clear the samples that were featured on it. Gwenno had been a professional dancer in Cardiff. She saw the band play live there and became a huge fan, learning all the moves and vocal parts before auditioning for the group. After this, in 2007, they will try to launch the band in America, and just the idea of releasing a song called Pool Shapes, which is a pretty obscure bit of British slang, to the US feels like a totally insane idea. But they did have a deal with Cherry Tree Records, who are about to have a big role in Lady Gaga becoming one of the biggest stars in the world. They were her first record label. Cherry Tree Records, the record company owned by the producer Cherry Cherry Boom Boom, who gets, of course, a shout-out in the early Lady Gaga song AA, Nothing Else I Can Say. In case we have any American listeners, my question is, are you lost? Pool Shapes, a British colloquialism that means dancing, basically. It did actually, we have a little bit of purchase in the US. It appeared on an episode of the, I was going to say legendary, but it's quite bad, actually. Let's just say drama, The L Word. And Billboard magazine once called this the 18th best girl band song of all time. A list that was topped by a band that the Pipettes are very much pulling from, the Ronettes, with their track Be My Baby. This US attempt, though, didn't quite work out. By 2008, Riot Becky and Rosé would have left the group, but they released 2 perfectly great singles before things started to go wrong. It's one of the things we like about 2006. It's an interesting time in that it's creating a space where these little weirdo indie bands can break through and have a few little hits. But also the door is quickly closing on them as indie rock is becoming less arch, less intellectual, and more masculine. I mean, I think even next week or the week after, we're going to be talking about the second album from Kasabian, which is as much as part of that as anything. They've said of the music of the 60s, we don't want to copy the music of that era. What would be the point? We're trying to bring a fresh approach, and we're very aware of the music of our time. And I would say arguably it's the bands that most successful are the ones that most rip off earlier eras. So maybe they should have just gone full 60s. I mean, it's kind of what Amy Winehouse did. They also, the Pipettes, started an unlikely feud with the Beatles. Becky saying in interviews, it's not so much the Beatles themselves as what they started. Because of them, music has been dominated by men and has sounded the same for the past 40 years. I mean, just look at the Baby Shambles or the Libertines. I find it incredible that anyone takes them seriously. And we have to give Gwenno from the Pipettes credit. She has thoroughly walked the walk and thoroughly followed her own path, releasing Welsh and Cornish language pop throughout the 2010s and now 2020s. I saw her live at Halloween. It was an amazing gig. And I can't help but think that a world where the Pipettes were more successful would be a better one. But sadly, we don't live in that kind of world, and this will be the end of their singles run. Although I would say it's kind of perfect that this kind of band releases 2 perfect singles and then disappears, leaving a gem of a track at number 26. Beaten, though, in these charts by Oakenfold and Brittany Murphy's Faster Kill Pussycat. 7th week for that one.
25.
I can't stand to see you cry.
24.
Fill My Little World by The Feeling. Well, that song was really staying firm for a long time. It was either at 16 or 17 for over a month, now starting to slip down these charts. It'll be interesting to see next week whether it goes into further freefall.
You ain't so tough. Come
23.
We have another song that was a serious contender for Stinker of the Week, mostly because it does the rudest thing that you can do, in my opinion, in a song which is totally waste Khalees. This is Busta Rhymes with Khalees and will.i.am. The album version of this track called I Love My Bitch. Here, in its radio form, I Love My Chick.
I love my lady, yep, I love my chick. I love my lady.
This coming in at downloads alone, so likely to get a top 10 placement next week. It's very much the wet and gushy school of clean lyrics, taking a filthy song and somehow, just somehow, making it work for the radio. Anyway, you know in film credits, right, where you have like a famous person in a supporting role, and the credits will be like starring Julianne Moore, Nicole Kidman, and Helen Mirren, say. Well, I would say this track is an and but situation. So it's like starring Busta Rhymes and Khalees. Oh, that's good. But will.i.am. Oh, that's bad. Side note, by the way, I'm kind of looking at my research document as I'm talking to you, and I fucking hate how every time I type will.i.am's stupid fucking name into my research document, Google Docs thinks it's a URL and turns it into a hyperlink. as if his name wasn't stupid enough. It has to be underlined in blue. As long-time listeners know, we love Khalees on this show. She is, for me, if there was any justice in the world, she would have been bigger than Beyonce. This song really does kick off my least favourite era of Khalees, which is her sort of hardcore hip-hop era. Her Khalees Is Here album, which kicks off with Bossy, her worst single, which will be out in September, and is the worst thing she's ever released, I would say, with the possible exception of this track right here. One of the rare cases where a hip-hop track does better in the UK than the US. It will only make it to number 41 in America. And, in fact, Busta Rhymes has talked in interviews since about how this song was sort of a big misstep in his career. He has said that he was coerced into releasing it as a single and that he thought it was a wrong move because the whole point about this Busta Rhymes album, I think it's called The Big Bang, is that he was working with Dr. Dre. And people wanted to hear a Dr. Dre production from him, and he gave them this instead. He told Rap Radar, "We put out Touch It, and that shit just popped off. And then the remix, that popped off. Then we came with the I Love My Chick record, which wasn't necessarily my choice for that album, or for it to be a single. That started to change the dynamic of that situation. That whole time killed my spirit for a while, but it didn't stop my drive or my desire to want to do what I was doing. It just compromised the feel-good excitement and the energy that I was on. I caught multiple assault charges because N-words were provoking me, and my temper was short because I was frustrated all the time. I had police waiting in front of my crib everywhere I went, but after a while, the stress became a little less." So a dark time in Busta Rhymes' life, but we can't think about that. We instead have to talk more about my favourite piece of trivia about Busta Rhymes, which is that he spent multiple summers in the 80s in the northern town of Morecambe. He says he particularly enjoyed trips to Blackpool, of which he said, "I learned how to smoke cigarettes there. I'd never seen a white person and a black person go together until I came there." Certainly better than Morecambe's other most famous resident, the boxer Tyson Fury. That quote about Busta Rhymes learning to smoke cigarettes in Morecambe was from the Metro. And in reading that article, I found another piece of trivia about Busta Rhymes that I love, which is that he, well, not love, because it was pretty traumatic for him, I'm sure, but he finally decided to lose weight after the pandemic, after he had severe breathing difficulties during sex. One night I was getting ready to and I was getting ready to have an intimate moment with my ex. I had a breathing issue after the intimate interaction. I was having a really difficult time breathing, so I got up and I walked out of the bedroom so she wouldn't panic seeing me trying to get myself calm. I was trying to inhale, but it felt like it wasn't working. I felt like I was having an asthma attack, but I don't have asthma. So I walked out of the bedroom and went into the living room, and I was forcing myself to inhale to relax. That was scaring me so much that it was a mindfuck because I had to stay calm and make sure she didn't hear me panic or hear me struggle to breathe. I'm butt-ass naked in the living room trying to calm myself down. When I came back into the room once I got right, I laid down next to her and she said something to me that really fucked me up. She was like, "Yo, this is not who I fell in love with." She didn't know what had happened outside, but she was looking at my body and the weight. And I guess we'll see how that weight loss goes when he's back on these charts in June 2008 with, of all things, a collaboration with Linkin Park. I guess if it's good enough for Jay-Z, it's good enough for Busta Rhymes. We'll see what that sounds like in 2 years' time.
22.
We have to talk about one of Wimbledon's most famous sons, and as somebody who lived in Wimbledon for a long time, nearly half a decade, I feel that he's my brother in some strange way. This is Jamie T. He's new at 22 with his track, Sheila.
Tell all the fellas that the lady is single.
What do you get if you whip Arctic monkeys out of their native Sheffield, shave them of their auxiliary members, and lock them in a backseat London studio with nothing but Stella, cigs, and Jamaican reggae for company? That was NME's introduction to the world of Jamie T. They called him the Poet Laureate of the Thames Beat scene, series of artists that really had nothing in common apart from the fact that they lived around the Thames, such as the Mystery Jets and Larrikin Love, who we discussed last week. This, his first single, Sheila, about a lovely girl I used to know who was a right drunk, a beautiful girl who just had a problem with drink and could sometimes get violent. If someone was giving her shit, she'd just turn on them and throw brew at them. This comes from his album Panic Prevention, which was named after a series of mixtapes that he used to create and give to people at his gigs, creating a community of sort of shared musical taste between him and his fans. He is the latest singer to make it big off MySpace, and in fact he has links to the other big MySpace singer, Lily Allen, who provides backing vocals on the B-side to this track, Rawhide. She, at that time, was very close with the 20-year-old Jamie Alexander Trays, who is, I would say, doing a bit of chav face in the Jamie T project, I have to say. He's trying to give oik, but was in fact privately educated before leaving at 16 to study at a local sixth form college, although he gets very angry with anybody who likes to point that out. This is The Independent. I hated education. I think public schools should be banned. I'm proud of my mum and dad. I'm proud of the fact that they sent me there. I'm as dumb as fucking pig shit, man. I didn't like it. It wasn't a terribly nice experience for me. I just didn't like education. I do not believe in private schools because I don't believe anyone should be educated any different from anyone else. I don't believe you should pay for education. My mother and father are fucking great human beings who worked their asses off to send me where I went, and I will fucking fight anyone on the fucking street who wants to have a problem with that. Yeah, it's an interesting guy, Jamie T, if that wasn't entirely clear from that piece of interview. This single was named Joe Wiley's Record of the Week, getting playlisted by BBC Radio 1, bringing it into the charts. Jamie T, in some ways anticipating where music was going, not just because of his MySpace link, but he told Drowned in Sound, I think the whole album thing might be getting a bit old now. I was chatting to someone the other day about releasing an album, well, not an album, but 4 tracks every 4 months on the internet as their own thing, and doing artwork and videos for all of them, and then people can sign up for it and get it that way while it's fresh. Sadly though, this sort of Netflix for musicians model is not one he took. He took a more traditional route, releasing this as a single with a 2006 video that features monkeys living in a house, and followed it up by a 2007 video which featured the actor Bob Hoskins lip-syncing to the lyrics. He named his album Panic Prevention because of suffering from panic attacks as a child, and it is that album that named him not only the Best Solo Artist at the 2007 NME Awards, but also got him nominated for the 2007 Mercury Prize. He was, however, beaten to that by the Clarksons, of whom we'll be talking about very soon. Other nominees include Amy Winehouse, Dizzy Rascal, Bat for Lashes, the second Arctic Monkeys album, and probably my winner, the New Young Pony Club album, Fantastic Playroom, an amazing 80s synth-pop-inspired pop masterpiece. Not only is Jamie T a singer-songwriter in his own right, but also he owned an independent label, Pacemaker, whose biggest claim to fame is that they put out the first single by a before-she-was-famous Adele in 2007. And he draws comparisons between himself and Adele. They both have long periods in between releasing albums. Have you noticed she goes quiet every time she stops releasing music? She's got the same manager as me. It's the same system. We both got brought up on this idea. Don't release anything until it's fucking good. Be brave enough to shut the fuck up. If your records are good, you'll survive. And the quality of Jamie T's record will give him 5 more top 40 hits in the next 10 years. However, his mental health will struggle, especially after his biggest success. His second album, Kings and Queens, will go all the way to number 2 in the charts, leading to a spot at Glastonbury, but he found his anxiety spiralling, admitting to chronic writer's block, and telling journalists, I don't know how to do anything. I'm horrendously dyslexic. I can't do maths at all. I'm scared of emails, scared of having to correspond with people. I don't understand punctuation. I get text messages and literally can't make head or tail of what they mean. I don't fucking know. However, he does occasionally still release albums and give interesting interviews, such as the one with The Independent we mentioned earlier, in which the journalist points out that he seems visibly drunk. Things remain very chaotic in Jamie T's world, as we will delve into more when his second single, If You Got the Money, comes out in October 2006. Nearly at the top 20 though, so let's head there.
21.
MyMyMy by Armand van Helden. MyMyMy was at 16 last week.
The top 20.
And our Should Have Been a Number 1 is kicking off the top 20, one of the best dance tracks of the decade, only just scraping its way into the top 20, while much lesser dance tracks that are just ripping off trap from the 80s make it into the top 10. The top 40 has never been fair, and its latest victims are Justice vs. Simian with We Are Your Friends.
20. Song that should have been this week.
One of the most hyped dance tracks of summer 2006 began life as a indie rock song called Never Be Alone back in 2002. As part of that release, the band Simian did a remix competition in which they asked people to submit remixes of the track. One of those was by the French duo Justice, or Justice. They won it, and now 3 years later, here it is in the top 40. I'd always thought that Simian, in this case, was Simian Mobile Disco, and it seems they were and they weren't. So Simian are Simon William Lord, Alex McNuckton, James Anthony Shaw, and James Ellis Ford. It is the latter two of those who break off from the band and form the more dance-orientated Simian Mobile Disco, who will have a few more dance hits later in the decade. And in fact, it was this track that led to the Simian Mobile Disco moniker. When we put out Never Be Alone, the label asked us for a B-side and we didn't have one, so we did a remix. We needed a stupid comedy name to call the remix, so we called it Simian Mobile Disco. I don't think it's the same connotation over here. They're talking to an American publication. But Mobile Disco is like a couple of balding, sweaty old men who play at weddings and bar mitzvahs. It's a really negative connotation. We just thought it was really funny at the time, but it's quite surprising how quickly jokes wear off. James Ford from Simian Mobile Disco, certainly not a joke, goes on to be an incredibly in-demand producer, best known for his work with Arctic Monkeys. Speaking about the second Arctic Monkeys album, he co-produces that, getting him his first Mercury nomination. And by this point, in 2006, he has indeed already produced albums both for the Mystery Jets, they of the Thames Beat scene, and the Test Icicles. And indeed, next year, he will be competing against himself for the Mercury Prize. He was the producer of the Clarkson's Miss of the Near Future.
As for Justice, they are Gaspar Huguet and Javi Xavier de Rosne from Gay Paris.
And this actually will be their only top 40 hit. Their incredible track, DANCE, can only make it to number 47 in June 2007, despite being among the best tracks released that year, and an amazing video where it's like their t-shirts are always changing. Well worth watching once you're done with this audio-based experience. And speaking of amazing videos, in fact, this track was responsible for Kanye West crashing the stage at an MTV Music Video Awards ceremony.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
No, another time, 3 years before that, in November 2006, he crashed the stage at the MTV Europe Music Awards in Copenhagen after he lost the best video.
This video cost $1 million, fam. I had Pam Anderson. I'm jumping across canyons.
Admitting to MTV's UK correspondent Tim Cash that he'd had a little sippy before deciding to get on the stage. If my video doesn't win, the award show loses credibility, he said on stage. He then admitted to the media, I haven't seen their video, possibly it could have been quite good, but no way better than Touch the Sky. That is complete bullshit. I paid $1 million. Obviously it's not all about the money, but the response it got transcended everything. It really made great TV. It took a month to film. I stood in a mountain. I flew a helicopter over Vegas. I did it to be king of all the videos, and I wanted to walk home with that award. He later had to apologise, saying it was just out of raw emotion. I had a couple of drinks, but I was more drunk with adrenaline. I was drinking at the award show because I feel so at home at award shows. On one hand, I felt like I should have won, but if anybody watches the show, I was laughing. People don't understand my dry sense of humour. I was up there and said, hell nah, I should have won. Yeah, we don't understand Kanye's dry sense of humour. His dry, anti-Semitic sense of humour. But of course, he learnt his lesson right there and would never again dream of getting onto stage when someone wins an award he doesn't think they deserve. Although, of course, hot take, he was right. Beyonce did deserve to win that award over Taylor Swift. And had she won that, maybe pop culture would be a little bit different. But I'll leave you to think about that in your own time. Yes, that's right, there will be homework from this show.
19.
We have Lost Prophets with Rooftops, and I'd love to move quickly on from the Lost Prophets, but we do have to move to the album chart, because we didn't mention last week that their album Liberation Transmission knocked Keane off the top of the album charts, giving them a number one album in a week where the only other new entry was Plan B at number 30. He will eventually chart in the 2000s, but not until 2009. His debut singer Mama just missed the top 40 this time next week. As for this week on the album chart, 20 years ago, we had another new number one on the album chart from Muse with Black Holes and Revelations, with the only other new entry being the posthumous American 5 from Johnny Cash. And quite frankly, José Gonzalez could really take some lessons about how to do covers from Johnny Cash, who manages to find a stark emotional core in every song he covered in the American series, and there was a lot of them. Listen to his takes on the song that appeared in our Best Songs of 2003 list, 9 Inch Nails' Hurt, and you'll see a man who is so good at covers that we'll allow him to break rule 2 of this podcast, which is that no song sounds better slowed down. And seeing as we're talking about his album American 5, here's a little clip of his fire and brimstone-laden version of the traditional song God's Gonna Cut You Down from that album. Get your pen and paper out now, Jose. You've got some notes to make. But we have a song of note here, very close to being or should have been a number one this week. Certainly, if I was recording this show in the year 2006, this would have been my pick. It ends up as the 28th biggest selling song of the year, selling 163,000 copies in between Smack That by Akon and Irreplaceable by Beyonce. This is the Rogue Traders with Voodoo Child.
18.
Chartwatch blog said of them, their unique selling point is the way they use older tracks as the inspiration for newer songs, but rather than lazily sampling the tracks, they re-record the melodies themselves. Hence, whilst Voodoo Child is based around the guitar riff from Elvis Costello's Pump It Up, every moment of the track is performed by the band. Such an approach does, of course, raise some interesting artistic questions, for whilst the original artist has the right to license a sample and restrict its use if they desire, there is very little to stop an act re-recording an element of a song and using it in their own, just as long as full songwriting credits and due royalties are made. And that really made me think, oh, that's why they're called rogue traders, because they are, like, selling off, like, other people's goods. It's like when I didn't realise that the Chemical Brothers was a pun for about 10 years. But apparently that isn't the case. After I had that realisation, they in fact take their name from a 1998 psychological drama starring Ewan McGregor. They were formed in the early 2000s by Australians James Ash and Steve Davis, who had actually met in the late 80s while DJing in London, working together in a group called Union State. They relocated to Melbourne in 1992, having 2 hits with Out to Get You and Retrosexual, before they decided to reinvent their sound, incorporating more guitars, and thus Rogue Traders was born. Here they are adding to their team the Australian actress Natalie Bassingthwaite, who played Izzy in Neighbours. At this point, she auditioned for the band and for a number of years became their singer with this song, sampling Elvis Costello's track Pump It Up. And indeed, they have already beaten the chart placement of the original, which made it to number 24. It was Elvis Costello's attempt at making the most rocking song that was sort of against rock and roll debauchery. He said it's a song about wondering just how much you can fuck, how many drugs you can do before you get so numb you can't really feel anything. He says that he himself took inspiration from the drum beat to the 1979 song My Sharona by The Knack, which is interesting because it is that song that the Rogue Traders will sample next in their follow-up single Watching You. Rogue Traders won't be the only people to sample from Pump It Up. Olivia Rodrigo was accused of plagiarism due to the similarity between the guitar riff for her track Brutal, one of my favourite Olivia Rodrigo tracks, and Pump It Up. However, Costello admitted that he himself had taken inspiration from Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues, and so said, "This is fine by me, it's how rock and roll works. You take the broken pieces of another thrill and you make a brand new toy." Of course, that meant that when Taylor Swift was inadvertently copied by Olivia Rodrigo, she was equally cool. Oh no, she threatened to sue her and now they're in a feud. Great. In Australia, they had their first top 20 hit with One of My Kind, a cover of sorts of INXS's Need You Tonight. Made it all the way to number 10 in the Australian charts. And Rogue Traders were very careful that they didn't want to be seen as just like the debut of another like Neighbours singer, and so she only features in the video in a very obscured way, and they didn't promote her being on the song at all because they wanted it to be liked under its own merits rather than because of its Neighbours connection. This was enough to get them the support slot on the Girls Aloud tour in 2006, and 3 of their tracks appeared in Old Navy adverts in 2007. This not, however, enough to break them. In America, by 2008, Natalie Bassingthwaite will have quit the band to focus on her solo career, and she also happened to have married the drummer of Rogue Traders, who left shortly after her. All a story for another day. We'll be talking about their track Watching You in October. Voodoo Child, one of those classic songs whose lyrics basically make no sense whatsoever, and yet are brilliant. And that's sort of true of all the best pop music. They entering this chart on downloads alone in the top 20, so we're likely to see them in the top 10 next week. Exactly how far? We'll find out in 7 days' time. But first, Supermassive Black Hole by Muse, dropping 7 places in the singles chart just as they head to number 1 on its album equivalent.
17. 16.
Pink with Who Knew? And who knew that in their 13th week, Infernal would still be in the top 20 with their track From Paris to Berlin.
15.
Not sure how it's taken them 13 weeks to get from Paris to Berlin. Maybe it's like one of those marathons where you do it like in a old style, you know, one of those metal things that people used to use to like scuba dive. If anyone knows what those, are they called like bathing machines? Anyone knows what one of them's called? Comment, wherever you can comment. It will reach to me. Send it out via pigeon. Sergio Mendes and the Black Eyed Peas are at
14.
with Mashkanada. That's been a month on the chart and leading us to a disappointing result for a legend of the charts. 7 number ones as a solo artist, 5 as part of the group Wham. So that means it is, of course, George Michael with the first single from his greatest hits, 25, a song I really like. This is definitely my discovery of the week, An Easier Affair.
13.
George Michael said this song was inspired by the scandal that ensued after he was found slumped in his car in central London, cautioned by the police for possession of cannabis. He, at the time, had joked that he wasn't going to write a song about this incident, a reference to the fact that he wrote outside after being caught in a public toilet in Los Angeles. But, of course, he ended up doing it, dedicating the song to female fans who didn't know he was gay until 1998. He says, literally, this track came to me the day after I realised what a huge deal the whole business about Hyde Park Corner was. I was getting such a kicking. I suddenly woke up and was like, yes, I've got an idea. I'm thinking of giving the police part of my publishing, actually. My life is very extreme in certain ways, so it's much easier to write about things that might have some kind of resonance. The song basically about how he's done living for other people and he's sort of found joy in his life by just living for himself. Let me tell you, people, it's an easier affair not living my life with other people on my mind. I've got nothing to hide from anyone. Yes, I'm walking on new air, just living my life. He sings. He does the thing I love, which is when a pop star makes reference to their older material in their new stuff, like when Britney sings My Loneliness Ain't Killing Me No More in Stronger. He sings Look Who's Talking Guilty Feet Now, of course his reference to Careless Whisper. Not all the lyrics, though, are so good. I can see why this wasn't the smash hit that previous of his tracks had been when I read the line, Sticks and stones won't kill the boner that I have for my life. Although I guess we have to give him credit for writing exactly what he wants to write. Who has earned it more than George Michael? This is one of 2 new songs that featured on his new Greatest Hits album. The second one we'll hear later in the year. It's his duet with Mucha. He also did a new version of his track Heal the Pain, but as a duet with Paul McCartney. In June 2007, became the first artist to perform live after Wembley Stadium was renovated. But there are slight signs that things aren't going so well for him, apart from this low placement in the singles chart. The fact that he'd only released a Greatest Hits less than a decade ago, although we have to wonder whether it may be a record company-driven decision. George Michael, around this point, said in loads of interviews that he was never going to release another album, and so maybe this was some way of getting out of a contract. Meanwhile, he sort of enters into his weird era, played a guardian angel on a US TV series. He performed on American Idol in 2008, joking, when asked what Simon Cowell may think of his performance, I think he'll probably tell me I shouldn't have done a George Michael song. He's told plenty of people that in the past, so I think that would be quite funny. Meanwhile, the legal difficulties continue. Accused of cruising again in Hampstead Heath in July 2006. 2007 pleaded guilty to drug-impaired driving. This all down to his heavy use of cannabis. By December 2009, he said he was down to 7 or 8 spliffs a day instead of the 25 he had been smoking in the mid-2000s. By 2015, he said that he'd stopped using cannabis for 18 months, although he had to enter drug rehab in 2015. And this sort of becomes the person that George Michael is seen as, the guy who constantly smoking weed and crashing his car. Meanwhile, we only learnt after his death that he had donated millions to charity anonymously, including the Terence Higgins Trust, Macmillan Cancer and Childline. He also was quite well known for, if there was a sob story for someone on television that particularly chimed with him, he would ring up the production and send them the money. For example, when one Deal or No Deal contestant talked about wanting to fund IVF treatment, he rang up and paid for it. He once tipped a student nurse working as a barmaid £5,000. Another woman came forward and said that he had paid for her IVF treatment after seeing her talk about her problems on This Morning. A kind heart in a troubled soul, George Michael in 2006. He'll be back with that Mutia track, This Is Not Real Love, in November. We'll see whether that can get any closer to the top 10. And speaking of that, of course, we have to get closer to the top 10.
12.
Valerie by the Zootons, a month on the chart for that.
11.
The Automatic with Monster, my favourite song about energy drinks.
The top 10. 10.
Taking us into the top 10, and it's a top 10 with 2 new entries in it. Paolo and Nutini's Last Request and Bob Sinclar's World Hold On. Other songs that will be entering the top 10 this week, Lily Allen's Smile and In the Morning by Razorlight. They were at 13 and 15 respectively last week. Should bode well for one of them challenging for the top spot. We'll see if any of them have what it takes to beat Shakira's Hips. One of them certainly won't. They are here. A new entry for Bob Sinclar and Steve Edwards with World Hold On, brackets, Children of the Sky.
9.
This become Bob Sinclar's joint biggest hit, the first time he's hit the top 10 since his song I Feel For You in August 2000. Bob Sinclar's songs used all over the 2006 World Cup, making this yet another sort of World Cup release. Very similar to his other single, Love Generation, that we talked about earlier this year, both very whistling forward, although this is the rare case when they do what I call the dance music follow-up, where you release a second single that sounds exactly the same as your first. Usually that means that second one isn't quite as good. Maybe not the case here. This is the rare case of the second one being more successful than the first. Bob Sinclar is Christophe Lefrion from Paris, began DJing in the 80s, first influenced more by hip-hop and jazz music, but then became part of the French Touch generation of house music, Daft Punk probably being the most famous sons of that movement. His best work so far for me is Gin Tonic, his house version of a Jane Fonda workout routine. And if that sounds familiar to you, it's because it was ripped off by Space Dust, who got it all the way to number one, their version called Gym and Tonic. Bob Sinclar said of this, "I wanted to kill that bitch Jane Fonda because when I tried to clear the sample, first she said, no, I don't want my vocal on top of a dance music song. So after many exchanges with lawyers, I think she said yes. Finally, because I was signed with Warner and her husband Ted Turner at the time was the boss of Warner. Although while he was trying to clear it, Space Dust re-recorded the sample and released their own version all the way to number one in the UK. If you want the full story of what happened there, I heartily recommend a video that I've talked about multiple times on this show, which is by Howard Hands TV, and it's about Cool on Me by Eric Prydz and how that was basically ripped off. But the first story that he tells in that video is all about Gym Tonic by Bob Sinclar. Really can't recommend that video highly enough. It's the thing that made me want to make YouTube videos. Which, by the way, you can look at my YouTube videos for free. There's one about Madonna, one about Crazy Frog, and one about Liberty X. So check those out, please. Anyway, back to Bob Sinclar. This song reached number one in Hungary and Romania. They were hungry for his music. He told Complex that he heard singer Steve Edwards on a track by the French DJs Cassius called The Sound of Violence, got their permission to use the same singer as they had, recorded 3 songs with Steve Edwards, of which this is the only one to be released. It's apparently the bass line of this is played with a synthesizer on an organ sound, which is the same sound that Kylie Minogue used in her Can't Get You Out of My Head. He was told by his record label apparently to leave out the whistle because it had been such a prominent part of his previous single, but he said no, and the result was his biggest hit so far. He made enough money that he was able to fulfill his dream of buying a Ferrari, and he probably may be able to buy another one when his next single, Rock This Party, comes out in October 2006. We'll see if that can beat this number 9 position. But one thing that certainly has is Neo, dropping 3 places in his 3rd week with Sexy Love.
8.
A former stinker of the week on this show for being one of the most generic pieces of R&B of the year. And speaking of such things, Pussycat Dolls and Snoop Dogg are at
7.
with Buttons. They too, 3 weeks on this chart. Former number 1 at number
6.
Sandy Tom's I Wish I Was a Punk Rocker with Flowers in My Hair.
In 77 and 69.
It's so funny how the zeitgeist just moves on so quickly from Sandy Tom. She was the hot new thing for approximately 10 minutes before everybody moved on to the much more interesting Lily Allen, who gave much better interviews and definitely just had a cooler vibe. And sometimes that's all it takes in pop music. We'll see whether it's enough, though, to get her the same number 1 spot that Sandy Tom managed earlier in the year. Our highest new entry this week, though, comes from one of Scotland's great 2000s soul singer. I'm not sure how much competition he has there. Actually, I would say that Charlene Spiteri is Scotland's great soul singer of that decade. But the point is, here's Paolo Nutini, and here is his last request.
5.
Lay down beside me.
Chartwatch blog said of him, despite his Italian-sounding name, he actually hails from Paisley in Scotland, and he is just the latest in a refreshingly long line of singer-songwriter talents that UK labels are pushing heavily. Make no mistake, manufactured pop is no longer the priority it was. Self-sufficient performers are in. This is, of course, a very welcome move, particularly if the discoveries carry on being of quality like this. And I couldn't disagree more. The UK charts suck when they're not fun, and there is nothing fun about Paolo Nutini and the guy we'll be talking about next week, who's very much in the same mould, James Morrison. This first single by Paolo Nutini, though, is a gentle acoustic ballad about a destructive former relationship. He came from a family of fish and chip shop owners, but attended youth theatre and was encouraged to sing by his grandfather, who loved music, and a teacher at his school. Paolo spoke to The Big Issue about being inspired by his grandfather, who would play these arias from operas on the piano after his wife died as a sort of way to commune with her. And he says that his trait of singing with his eyes closed whilst on stage is something that he took from his grandfather. The song is based on Paolo Nutini's childhood sweetheart, a woman called Terry Brogan. They met when they were 15 at school together. At that school, he asked his music coach whether he should do his hires, the sort of Scottish equivalent of what GCSEs or A-levels, Scottish people write in, or go into his music career. She suggested the latter, saying that after all, if it didn't work out, he could always go back to his hires. So he left school to work as a roadie for the Scottish band Speedway. Long-term listeners of this show may remember them from their rock cover of Genie in a Bottle a few years ago. He worked as a studio hand, and in the spare time there, he would work on his own demos with the drummer of Speedway, and he was first spotted by the music industry when there was a homecoming reception for the Fame Academy winner David Snedden. Because Snedden was late, Paolo leapt up on stage to entertain the crowd with an Elton John song, and at that party was the head of radio promotions at Mercury Records, Brendan Moon, who would end up as Paolo Nutini's manager. So he made his first demos, and it got him signed to Atlantic Records in 2005, just shortly after his 18th birthday. He was a particular favourite of the founder of Atlantic Records, Armand Ertegun, who had a legend in music, most famous for guiding the career of Aretha Franklin. He, in fact, forced the label to give this young man complete creative control, and he ended up as one of the acts performing at the Ertegun tribute concert after he died in December 2006, that concert most famous for featuring a reunion of Led Zeppelin. As I said, inspired by his girlfriend Terry Brogan, this song all about their breakup, but awkwardly, by the time he was promoting the album, they had got back together, meaning that he was spending every night singing breakup songs about a woman with whom he was not broken up. Unsurprisingly, after this, she banned him from singing about their sex life, but by 2014, they had broken up, leading to him releasing a whole album of more breakup songs about her. This will be his only top 10 single, but he has 7 more top 40s to come. His album, The Streets, certified 5 times platinum in the UK. By next year, he will support the Rolling Stones, performing with them at the Isle of Wight Festival. He tells a story of rehearsing with the Rolling Stones in a travel lodge, and he says, asked whether he has any regrets about this time in his life by The Big Issue, he says, "The dodgy looks. Why did I wear so many waistcoats, dude?" Well, that question may be answered when his next single, Jenny, Don't Be Hasty, comes out later in the year. But first, we need to find out whether Shakira has kept her place at the top or whether Razorlight or Lily Allen have prevented her from doing so. First, a former number 1 at number
4.
6 weeks on the chart for Man Eater by Nelly Furtado. The first of those downloads from last week is here at number 3. And that is Razorlight with In the Morning.
Lose yourself in the morning.
Meaning that not their highest charting single, Somewhere Else, got all the way to number 2. They'll have to see whether their next single, America, can go much further. But we have to go further, seeing whether Shakira or Lily Allen have made it to the top of the charts. Well, I can tell you that the number 1 single this week, 20 years ago, sold 39,501 copies, and that gave its singer plenty of reason to smile. It is Lily Allen, knocking Shakira and Wyclef Jean to number 2 with Hips Don't Lie.
2.
Hips don't lie, and I'm starting to feel it's right.
So ironically, this is actually the highest selling week of copies of Hips Don't Lie, but it is the week in which they lose the number 1 spot. But it is enough sales to give her first week at top of the download charts, the first of 5 weeks that Shakira will spend there. Maybe surprising, as Lily Allen's fan base you would think is primarily online, what with her being a MySpace girl. Her track will actually never top the download charts. She won't manage that feat until The Fear comes out in 2009. One thing I have to mention about Hips Don't Lie, before we move on to this week's number 1, is, and I don't know if this is a Bristol thing, but there was a brand of sort of cut price, I think it was just kids' clothes, called Be Wise. And so every time Shakira sings, "So be wise and keep on reading the signs of my body," I think about going into that kids' clothes shop. I think it had a puffin as its mascot. Certainly not what Shakira intended, I wonder whether she'd even heard of the clothing shop Be Wise. These are the important questions that need to be asked about the 2000s. But we can't ask them because we have to look at Smile by Lily Allen, this week's number 1, moving from number 13 last week. I said that last week her father, Keith Allen, appeared in the video for a number 1 single, World in Motion by New Order, but he also apparently wrote the rap in that song, and so Lily Allen becomes the second Allen to write a number 1 single. When it comes to family members having number 1 singles, we've had brothers and sisters, both have number 1 singles, of course, Natasha and Daniel Bedingfield. We've had fathers and daughters, Frank and Nancy Sinatra in their duet Something Stupid. We've had mother and son, Lieutenant Pigeon's Moldio Doe had the son as the lead singer and his mum as the piano player. And father and son, Julio and Enrique Iglesias, have both had number 1 singles. But so far, no mother and daughter combination has had a number 1, whether separately or as a duet, unless Sam Fender and Olivia Dean are secretly mother and daughter, which seems slightly unlikely. Exciting time for women in pop music, though. This is our 4th solo female in a row to top the UK charts. The first time that's ever happened that we've had 4 solo female artists in a row, although we did have in 2004 female vocalists at the top week on week. Britney Spears, Madison Avenue, Billie Piper and Sonique, although Madison Avenue were a band, so not solo. And they are all songs from 2000s, which leads me seamlessly, it's almost like I wrote this, into a plug for the Patreon, where we have released the first part of our ranking of every number 1 in the 2000s, which will feature all of those songs. The second part coming very soon, as is our next episode of this show. Next week we will find out whether Niles Barkley, James Morrison, Rihanna or Shane Ward can stop Lily Allen from having a second week at number 1. So join us then. In the meantime, follow us on social media for more from the show. If you go to our website, the2000schartshow.wordpress.com, you can find links to all of our things, our YouTube videos, our Patreon, our Substack. Please like and 5-star review the show if you liked it, or recommend it to a friend who loves the 2000s as much as you do. And we are going to keep loving the 2000s next week, and we're going to end the show with a 2000 song that I love. Number 1 this week in 2006 was Lily Allen with Smile.
It makes me smile.